Good morning, welcome to Tuesday's edition of Indycar. My name is Gordon Ross. Today I'm in Partick and I've got three subjects for you this morning in the news. And the first one is the comments of the French Finance Minister today, who is on a visit to London at the moment. His comments were interesting from my point of view because they confirmed my fears over Brexit in words which were simple for everybody to understand, and I think cast the whole Brexit arrangements and Britain's role and how it perceives itself in Europe in a completely different light. Now, according to the French Finance Minister, the United Kingdom is not going to be allowed financial passporting. That was quite a sort of blunt warning to the UK government. Financial passporting will not be possible with a free trade deal, simply because they never have been possible with free trade deals. In order to get financial passporting, you have to be within the European community. You have to be a member. The passporting works as an internal passporting system. It does not work after you have left. Now, for this reason, the UK cannot get financial passporting. It's just that it isn't possible, and therefore all companies in London or even Edinburgh or anywhere else who deal with financial institutions in Europe on a regular basis will not be able to transact business in the usual seamless way that they do now. As a result of this, many financial companies have already left the City of London or are in the process of making arrangements to leave, taking thousands and thousands of highly paid jobs with them. Now, in a way, this is to be expected because part of the result, if you like, of separating yourself from the European Union is that you separate yourself from the advantages of membership, and the advantages of membership are the free trading within the boundaries of the European single market. Now, speaking of single markets reminds me of something else. It's been said many times in the press recently that there is a UK single market. Now, this is a total lie. There has never been any kind of single market in the UK, because the UK Union, if you want to call it that, is a forced union. The country operates as one state, therefore it cannot have a single market. It has its own internal economy, and that is it. It's not a single market. It doesn't operate across the border with Scotland, or across the border with Ireland, across the border with Wales, because there are no borders. It operates as a single country. So this is a total myth, and this is a myth that's been manufactured by the Tory government and Whitehall to give the impression, particularly to Scotland, that if it had any inclination to leave the Union of the United Kingdom, that it would somehow be shut out of this alleged single market of the UK. This is absolute balderdash. It's complete and utter rubbish. It would be no problem at all for independent Scotland to trade with England, Wales and Northern Ireland, because we use the same currency, and because we use the same currency, it has the same value across borders. So it wouldn't matter whether we had some solid border or no solid border. It wouldn't make any difference, because all our laws are broadly in line and our currency is worth the same amount, and therefore there is no barrier to trade across the border with an independent nation of Scotland, instead of, as it is at the moment, Scotland is part of this one larger state called the UK. So that's a myth. Get rid of that thought from your heads. There is no internal common market in the UK. There just isn't one. Now, moving along a little bit further, I mentioned some other things in my post about free trade and what will happen to the UK. Now, we know that passporting cannot happen, but also the French Finance Minister today made a very, I thought, quite not chilling, but certainly a warning to everybody in the UK, and particularly to everybody in Europe, to prepare for no deal at all. In other words, to prepare for a hard Brexit. I think the European Union is pessimistic about the chances of Britain securing any kind of trade deal with the European Union, because the UK has placed so many red lines in its way. In other words, the European Union has rules. It will not relax the rules for the UK. The UK has set itself apart and has set these red lines about immigration and about lawmaking and the jurisdiction of courts. And it set those red lines to separate itself, to fulfil the wishes of the majority in England and Wales, who wanted to get control of their laws back and to get control of their borders back from Europe. Now that's fair enough. The European Union has said, well, if that's what you want, then there cannot be a trade deal. The problem is that Scotland and Northern Ireland didn't vote for any of this, and we do want to have a trade deal, and we do want to leave our borders open so that people, goods and services can flow in and out unimpeded and without constantly having to get visas to go from one place to another and having to work out complicated travel arrangements, complicated import and export arrangements. So you see where this is going. The point is that the British government has painted the country into a corner that it cannot get out of, and it is surrounded by these red lines that it's painted on the floor. It says, we will not cross this line. So the EU, standing on the other side of the room, says, well, if you get rid of the red lines, you'd be able to get over here. The problem is the UK government will not do that, because the Brexiteers, those in the countries of England and Wales who want to leave the EU, will not put up with it. Democratically, why should they? They voted to leave and leave won. Fair enough, but that only happened in England and Wales. Scotland voted 62% to stay. Northern Ireland, I don't know what the margin was there, but they also voted to stay. So these things competing with each other as well. So not a simple situation in anybody's book at all. So there are problems coming, and these warnings coming from outside of the UK make me worry that we're not going to get any kind of deal at all, because the British government has made it impossible for itself to get a deal. So what will happen is that the talks will stall as the British government puts too many conditions on them. The European Union will not be able to offer them any trade deal given these red lines that the UK has put in front of itself. And therefore, my fear is that we will come out of the European Union with no deal. And not only that, if there is no deal, there will be no transition period, because we'll be transitioning to nothing anyway. So what's the point of transitioning if you're going to jump off a cliff? You can't transition your way down into the water 100 feet below. You're just going to plummet. So this is not going to happen the way we are being told. So there are a lot of things at the moment going on in the background. Meanwhile, at home, to bring myself back to my third point, there have been several articles written online recently, which I've been reading, and not for the first time, about the legalities of Scottish sovereignty. Now, this is something we all talk about as independence supporters, but many people in Scotland do not know this. People in Scotland are sovereign. We are more powerful than the Queen, and we are more powerful than our government. When we say in a democratic vote, and we have a majority, if we said we wanted rid of the Queen or we want rid of the government, then it will happen. We are not subjects of Her Majesty the Queen. Her Majesty the Queen is Queen Elizabeth I of Scots by the consent of the Scottish people, only because we have said we are allowing her to be our head of state, not because she reigns over any of us. She reigns over England and Wales, perhaps, because they have a different constitution. In Scotland, our constitution is written differently. Not only was it written into the Declaration of Arbroath, it was also written as a precondition into the Articles and Treaties of Union in 1707. What this means is that as part of the Acts of Union, Scotland demanded that its people remain sovereign as a precondition of the Union. Now that meant that those who actually were in charge of Scotland at the time, despite the sellout of the nobility selling Scotland down the river, as it were, and into the Union. There were those in the Parliament in Scotland at the time who could see the writing on the wall and realised that they needed to create what computer hackers call a backdoor. And the backdoor for Scotland in legal terms is this wonderful clause which says that the people of Scotland have the right to sue their own government. In other words, they have the right to challenge and depose their own rulers, whoever they might be. Whether they're in England or Scotland makes no difference. And the interesting thing is that when the Holyrood Parliament was forced on the Labour Party, remember they didn't want to do it, and Tony Blair was dead set against opening up the Holyrood Parliament. He went ahead with it because he was forced to do it. But he did two things in order to extract some revenge for this, if you like. And one of the things he did was he created a thing called the Supreme Court in London. Now, Britain never had a Supreme Court until Tony Blair came along. It had the High Court, but it didn't have a Supreme Court. This is an idea he borrowed from the United States to create a court which is the highest in the land, which could not be challenged. Now, until that point, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom was normally Parliament itself. So he created this Supreme Court. But the problem is that under Scottish law, the Supreme Court holds no sway in Scotland, none whatsoever. And it cannot do so because of the guarantees written into the Acts of Union. So therefore, this Supreme Court is just a name. It has no meaning in Scottish law. Scots are still sovereign. We can still vote ourselves out of the Union if we so wish. We don't need a Section 30 order from the British government because we are sovereign. We can take our own decisions whenever we like. And this is what Nicola Sturgeon meant when she said that independence was not in her gift to give. It is up to the people of Scotland to decide when they've had enough and when they want to vote on it. And it is therefore in our hands. It always has been in our hands, but this business of our sovereignty has been very carefully hidden from us for decades. In fact, for centuries. It's been buried under tons and tons of amendments to legislation. It would be quite feasible for the Scottish Parliament, or the Scottish Government, to create legislation straight away which completely overrides Section 30, would give us a referendum as soon as we liked, the result of which would be completely binding, with no reference to England whatsoever. And that would have legal force in international law, simply because the Scottish Constitution is guaranteed in the Acts of Union and in the Declaration of Arbroath, and the clauses in the Acts of Union have never been repealed, as far as I know. You could do your own research on this online. There are some resources online, pardon me, and I'll perhaps do another show in more detail about this subject later on. But just remind your friends who maybe haven't voted for independence in the past that Scots have never had a problem with deciding their own destiny. In fact, we alone out of all of the United Kingdom's citizens are in a unique position to decide for ourselves what we want to do. If we don't like Brexit, we can just say no. No, we're not doing Brexit. We're going to leave the United Kingdom if you leave the EU. And as soon as the EU says you're getting no deal, you're going out with no deal, I am pretty sure that those who've been sitting on the fence up until now, when they know that they are sovereign, will come flocking in and say, right, let's get this done. Let's leave the United Kingdom. Our own kingdom is doing perfectly well. We've got plenty of oil. We can also negotiate with England over oil and gas. We don't need to worry about that. We've got so much and so many natural resources. We don't need England to survive. We never did in the first place. And we've always had the power to escape. We've just been denied the knowledge of it. We've been kept in the dark. We've been fed rubbish for years. We've been told that we were, or given the impression that we were in some way inferior to England and that our law system was not the equal of England's. Well, I'm afraid it is. And there is no way that the Supreme Court in England can trump any decision made here in Scotland by ourselves. I will leave you with that happy thought to go about your business today. I'm sorry the weather's so poor, but at least you can go out the door with a bit of a spring in your step, knowing that you, as a Scottish person living in Scotland today, are sovereign. You're more powerful than the Queen. You're more powerful than than Theresa May or all of the Tory government. And you'll notice that in the papers today and also on the internet that Nicola Sturgeon has been voted the most influential woman in the UK, above even Her Majesty the Queen, with Mary Black in third place just behind the Queen. So two of the most influential women in the country are both Scots. One is the leader of Scotland and the other one is a fine young MP who makes stirring speeches protecting women's rights and fighting for the rights of women who've had their pensions snatched away from them, and that's Mary Black. So off you go, going about your business, be happy, and remember that you are a sovereign Scot. And when it comes to voting for independence, our decision is final, and we cannot be trumped. We cannot be trumped by the High Court in England or the Supreme Court or anybody else. What we decide is our decision, and it will stand, and it will be binding. Bye for now.